My name is Emily Parker. I'm 26 years old, and for most of my life, I've known exactly where I stand with my parents.
Second.
Always second. Behind my brother, Dylan, the golden child, the loud one, the one who could do no wrong. Even when he wrecked Dad's car at 16, even when he failed out of college twice. Even when I graduated with honors and got a full-time job straight out of school, the only thing Dad said was, "Well, let's see how long that lasts." That's the kind of love I grew up with, conditional, cold, and always one step out of reach. We live, or rather, they live in a beautiful house in Connecticut, all white shutters and manicured lawns, the kind of place that hides how bitter it really is inside. I moved out 3 years ago, and I never went back except for holidays. And even then, it was like I was furniture. Present but not really seen. But I guess I should start this story a little earlier, on the day my grandmother passed.
It was a Wednesday.
I remember because I had just come out of a work meeting when I saw 5 missed calls from my mom. I felt the panic rise before I even hit call back. When she answered, her voice was flat.
"She's gone," Mom said.
No softness. "No, Emily, honey," or "sit down." "Grandma?" I asked, breath catching in my throat. "What happened?" "Heart failure. In her sleep. She didn't suffer. The funeral's Saturday." She paused. "Dylan will be doing the reading." Of course he would. I sat on a bench outside my office, shivering even though it was warm out. My grandmother, Margaret Lane, was the only person in our family who ever made me feel seen. She used to tuck my hair behind my ears and say, "You got a quiet fire in you, Emmy. Just wait till they see it burn." She was 82, sharp as ever, loved puzzles and peppermint tea. She had a crooked laugh that made me giggle as a kid. I saw her just 3 weeks before she passed. She made me a turkey sandwich and insisted I take half her pantry when I left. I never got to say goodbye. At the funeral, I sat 2 rows back, not in the family row. Dylan had brought his girlfriend and was front and center, his hand dramatically clutching Mom's shoulder. Dad stood next to the casket with his head bowed, playing the part of grieving son. I knew he hadn't visited her in months. I stayed quiet, just like they expected. After the service, everyone gathered at the house for coffee and store-bought cookies. I sat in a corner of the living room, nursing a bitter drink, when I overheard Mom talking to someone in the hallway. "She was old-fashioned," she said with a sigh. "Didn't really have much. Some jewelry, a couple hundred in the bank. We're selling the house." I froze. Grandma's house? The place she'd lived in for over 40 years? The creaky steps, the backyard where I used to pick tomatoes with her in the summer? Just like that, gone. "She left a will, though," Mom added, sounding annoyed. "We meet with her lawyer next week. Just a formality." I wasn't invited to the meeting. A week passed. I went back to work, tried to focus, but I kept thinking about Grandma. I kept dreaming of her kitchen, the smell of cinnamon, the sound of her humming while washing dishes. Then, out of nowhere, I got a call. It was a woman's voice. "Miss Parker? This is Judith Fields from the firm that handled Margaret Lane's estate. I'd like to schedule a time for you to come in." I blinked. I wasn't told I needed to be there. She hesitated. "Your grandmother left something in your name, and I'd prefer to discuss it in person." I met her that Friday in a small office downtown. My palms were sweating, my heart thudding in my chest. Part of me wondered if it was a mistake. Maybe she meant someone else. Maybe it was just a photo album or some old china. But when I walked in, Judith stood, smiled kindly, and said, "Your grandmother was a remarkable woman. She wanted you to have this." She handed me an envelope. Inside was a letter in Grandma's handwriting. I could barely read the words through my tears. "My dearest Emily, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone, and your parents are probably trying to sweep everything I had under the rug. You were always the one who saw people, who listened, who tried. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you from how they treated you, but I can give you this now. You'll find the deed enclosed. The house is yours. Sell it, keep it, make a life in it. And there's more in the trust, as detailed below. Use it well. I believe in you. I always did. Love, Grandma." I sat in stunned silence. Judith explained gently. She set up a trust 5 years ago. After her husband died, she sold some land she inherited and invested it. The total value now is just under $2 million. I couldn't speak. $2 million. And the house, Judith continued, sliding over another envelope, is in your name now. All paid off. I left that office dazed. I walked 3 blocks before I realized I was crying. Not just because of the money, but because someone saw me. Someone believed in me enough to leave me something real, something meaningful. Not out of pity, out of love. I didn't tell my parents.
Not yet.
I didn't know how. They'd made it so clear. You're nothing. You'll get nothing. Don't expect anything. I almost believed it. I almost let myself settle for scraps. But Grandma knew. And now I had something they couldn't take. The first thing I did that weekend was drive out to Grandma's house. I still had a key. It felt strange unlocking that door knowing it was mine now. The same wind chimes jingled on the porch. The same creaky floorboard by the hallway still squeaked when I stepped on it. I stood in the living room for a long time just breathing. The house smelled like lavender and dust. The furniture was covered in white sheets, but her presence was everywhere. Framed photos of me and her still lined the wall. A younger me, with crooked bangs and gap teeth, laughing in her arms. I smiled through tears. I miss you, I whispered. Then I heard a car pull up. I looked out the window and saw my parents getting out of Dad's silver SUV. Dylan followed behind, grinning like he knew something I didn't. I wasn't ready, but they were already walking up to the door. I took a deep breath and opened it. Dad's knock wasn't patient. It was 3 loud, sharp bangs, like the house owed him something. I stood in the doorway of the home I now legally owned, heart pounding in my ears, palms damp. They weren't expecting me to open the door.
They didn't know, not yet.
Mom blinked when she saw me. Emily, what are you doing here? Dad asked, pushing past me before I could answer. Dylan trailed behind him with that lazy smirk he always wore, the one that made me feel 12 again, small, uninvited, always a step behind. I could ask you the same, I said, stepping back just enough to let them all in. They walked into the living room like they owned it, like they'd done 100 times before. But now, with every creak of the floorboards, I felt something shift. The air wasn't theirs anymore. It was mine. She had made sure of that. Mom peeled back one of the white sheets covering the couch and gave a sniff. We're just here to look things over. You know, for the estate sale. I tilted my head. Estate sale? She turned around, annoyed. Well, yes, sweetie. We assumed you wouldn't want to deal with this. Your grandmother didn't leave much, and it's better we. She left the house to me, I said. Everything stopped. Dad lowered the sheet he'd started pulling off an armchair. Dylan stopped mid-step. What did you say? Mom's voice was sharp. I swallowed. I said, the house is mine. She left it to me in her will. The deed's in my name. That's ridiculous, Dad snapped, stepping toward me. We were her children. This house belongs to us. I shook my head.
No.
It doesn't. Dylan chuckled under his breath. Okay, so what? Grandma gave you a key, and you think you're the landlord now. She didn't give me a key, I said, pulling the envelope from my purse. She gave me this. I placed the letter from her and the deed on the coffee table, right between them and me. It felt like laying down a sword. Mom scanned the paper, her lips tightening with every line. No, she muttered. No, this has to be a mistake. Margaret wouldn't do this. She wouldn't. She did, I said quietly. 5 years ago, apparently. Dad's face was red. Who the hell convinced her to change the will?
Was it you?
You come here and manipulate an old woman. I didn't even know, I snapped, my voice rising before I could stop it. She didn't tell me. I found out from her lawyer a week ago. I didn't ask for any of this. Oh, but you're sure not giving it back, are you? Dylan scoffed. Figures. I took a shaky breath and turned toward him. You got everything else. The attention, the help, the forgiveness. Every mistake you ever made was swept under the rug. I was invisible. Grandma was the only one who ever treated me like I mattered. That's not true, Mom snapped. You chose to isolate yourself. No, I said, voice steady now. I chose to survive.
Silence.
For a long moment, no one said anything. Dad paced in the corner, fists clenched. Mom sat down like the news had physically knocked her off her feet. Finally, Dylan chuckled again. So, what? Now you're some kind of rich recluse with Grandma's house? Is this where you hide out and write bitter poetry? You have no idea what I'm doing, I replied. And you never cared to ask. He rolled his eyes. It's not like you'll even know what to do with it. This place is falling apart. Taxes alone will crush you. That's not a problem, I said, looking straight at him. What do you mean? I hesitated. Then, slowly, I pulled out the second paper. The one from the trust. The one that showed the number they were all dying to know. I don't owe you this information, I said. But let me make something very clear. Grandma left me a trust. And it's enough to take care of this place. And myself. And then some. I watched the color drain from my mother's face. Dad let out a bitter laugh. She gave you money? $2 million, I said quietly. The silence that followed was deafening. Mom looked like she was going to faint. Dad swore under his breath. Dylan's eyes went wide, then narrowed into a glare that felt like a dagger. And for the first time in my life, I felt still. Not scared. Not small.
Still.
Dad was the first to speak again. Well, then you should do the right thing. I stared at him. The right thing? Split it with the family. I laughed. It wasn't polite or restrained. It was bitter.
Ugly. Honest.
You want me to split what Grandma left me? After you all made it very clear I would inherit nothing? You're overreacting, Mom hissed. We didn't mean that literally. You said it. Word for word. I took a step closer. You said, don't expect anything when we're gone. You treated me like an afterthought my whole life. And now that Grandma finally saw me, you want to take that from me, too? Dad's face twisted. This isn't about you, Emily. This is about family. No, I said. This is about control. And I'm done letting you have it. I turned and walked toward the door. This visit is over. Emily. I mean it. You're trespassing now. They hesitated, but something in my voice must have finally landed, because Dylan rolled his eyes and stomped toward the door.
Mom followed, seething.
Dad lingered a moment longer, but I stared him down. Eventually he turned and left. I closed the door, locked it, and exhaled. I stood there for a long time, forehead pressed to the cool wood, heart racing. Then I walked through every room of that house.
Slowly.
Room by room. Like a quiet procession. I didn't care if the roof leaked or the paint peeled or the tiles needed replacing. It was mine. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I belonged somewhere. The next week, I moved in. I took vacation from work and spent my days scrubbing floors, clearing out dust, fixing hinges. I played Grandma's old records and made tea in her chipped blue kettle. I found a box of letters in the closet. Some were hers to me, one she never got the chance to give. One of them had a quote written in her cursive. The people who try to break you are the ones who fear your power the most. I smiled, because I was starting to believe it. A few days later, the text started. Mom asked if I'd reconsider. Said I was being selfish. Dylan sent a picture of the truck he wanted to buy with a note. You could help. Dad just sent one message. You think this changes anything? You'll always be the outsider. I didn't reply. I didn't have to, because for once, I had the final word. And I wasn't finished speaking yet. I didn't respond to their messages. Not out of spite, though I'd be lying if I said it didn't feel good to ignore Dylan's truck photo or Mom's passive-aggressive guilt texts. No, I stayed silent because it was the first time I didn't feel obligated to explain myself. For so long, I lived in a space of begging for scraps, of time, of praise, of attention. But Grandma had handed me something sacred, choice. And now I was learning how to use it. One morning, I was sitting on the sunlit porch of the house, sipping coffee in Grandma's favorite mug. The one that said "still blooming" in faded cursive when my phone buzzed. It wasn't them this time. It was from Judith Field's grandma's lawyer. "Hi, Emily." Her voice chirped warmly through the speaker when I answered. "I wanted to check in about something Margaret mentioned to me a few months before she passed. She asked me to keep it sealed until after the deed and trust were sorted, but now, well, she left you one more thing." I blinked. "There's more?" "A letter," she said.
And a key.
She insisted it be hand-delivered. "Do you have time today?" 20 minutes later, I was standing at the door, heart pounding, as Judith stepped out of her car with a small wooden box and a soft smile. She was very particular, Judith said. Said this would make sense to you when the time was right. The box was no bigger than a loaf of bread. It had a tarnished silver clasp and carved initials on top, ML. Inside was a letter in my grandmother's signature handwriting and a single antique-looking key on a ribbon. "Dear Emily, if you're opening this, then I know the house is yours now. But I also know that you need to find what's beneath it. Go down to the basement. Far wall. Behind the old wardrobe. Use the key. There's a safe. And in it, something I couldn't leave in the trust. It's your decision what you do with it. But I trust you'll understand why I saved it. All my love, always."
Grandma.
I stared at the paper, breath catching. A safe? In the basement? My legs moved before I even processed what I was doing. I carried the box with me, down the creaky wooden stairs of the old house's basement, where the scent of dust and concrete filled the air. The old wardrobe had been there forever. I remembered hiding behind it during childhood games, feeling its musty curtains brush my face. I pulled it aside, coughing as dust scattered into the air. There it was, a rectangular panel in the wall, almost invisible unless you were looking for it. I inserted the key. It clicked, and then the safe door creaked open. Inside were a few folders, some documents, and a small black leather notebook. I reached for it first. The leather was cracked with age, the edges slightly curled. I opened it and immediately froze. Inside were entries. Journal entries. About my parents. About money. About manipulation. About a loan. July 2nd, 1999, gave Thomas and Linda $80,000 to help with business startup. They promised to pay back within 3 years. May 17th, 2002. Still no payment. When I asked, Thomas got angry. Told me I'd never miss the money. Starting to worry. February 4th, 2005, found out Thomas put the money into something else entirely, vacation property. No mention of repayment. They said I was crazy to bring it up in front of Dylan. There were dozens of entries, all written in Grandma's sharp, meticulous script. Some were even photocopies of emails, receipts, and notes. She had documented everything. They hadn't just neglected her. They stole from her. And then there was a note at the very end. "If you're reading this, Emily, it means they still haven't returned a dime. And likely never will. I know this money means a lot to you, but I want you to understand something. You are not taking what doesn't belong to you. You are reclaiming what they tried to bury." I sat on the floor of that basement for over an hour, staring, thinking. Grandma didn't just give me money and a house. She gave me proof. Proof that they weren't victims of favoritism. That this wasn't just about feelings. That I wasn't the selfish one, the cold one, the one who turned away from family. I had spent years believing I was less because I didn't fit in. But maybe they made it that way because they were afraid I might see them for what they were.
Thieves.
Manipulators. And now I had the receipts to prove it. For a moment, I felt this surge of something hot and dangerous, revenge. The urge to march right into their home, throw the journal on the table, and watch their faces fall apart. But then a cooler thought slipped in. Leverage. I didn't want just satisfaction. I wanted power. I spent the next few days scanning the entire journal into encrypted files and storing the originals in a safety deposit box. I contacted Judith and asked her what legal routes were even possible. She said we could pursue reimbursement of the original loan, or even expose misappropriation if they'd claimed anything falsely on taxes or inheritance filings. But what she said next caught my attention most. "Emily," she said, They've been talking about contesting the will, haven't they? I blinked. How did you know? Because it always happens when someone thinks they deserved more. But if they try, this journal ends them. I smiled. For the first time in a long time, it felt like I was no longer on defense. I was the one holding the match. A few days later, as expected, an official letter arrived from my parents' attorney. They were contesting the will. The letter was so polished, so professional, so full of fake heartbreak and legal jargon it almost made me laugh. They claimed Grandma had not been of sound mind, that she was unduly influenced, and that long-standing family bonds had been unjustly severed. In other words, they thought they could invalidate her final wishes. I gave Judith everything. And then I waited. A week passed. Then 2. Then I got a call. Emily, Judith said with a smile in her voice, they've withdrawn the claim. What? I blinked. They got our counterclaim, with the attached journal entries, including the receipt logs and the note about the $80,000. My heart raced. So, that's it. For now, she said. They're not touching the trust. They're not touching the house. It's yours clean and final. I'd say it was one hell of a move. I hung up, sat back in Grandma's favorite reading chair, and let out a long, slow breath. I had spent most of my life thinking I was powerless. That family meant keeping your mouth shut. That love meant shrinking to fit their comfort. But now, the silence was mine. Not forced, chosen. And it was loud in the best way. A week later, I got an email from Dylan. Subject: let's talk. I didn't open it. The next day, Mom called. I didn't pick up. And the day after that, Dad drove by the house. He didn't get out of the car. He just sat there, idling across the street, staring at the porch where I sat drinking my morning coffee. I lifted the mug.
Cheers.
He drove away. I wasn't angry anymore. Not exactly. It wasn't rage that pulsed through me now. It was something deeper, quieter, like a door I'd always believed was locked, and now I knew it had never even been shut. I started writing again. Not just in a journal, but truly writing essays, stories, pieces about family dynamics, invisibility, generational silence. I sent one to an online publication on a whim. They accepted it, then asked for more. It was the start of something I hadn't dared dream about before. And every time I sat down to write, I'd look up at the photo of Grandma on the mantel. The one with her in the garden, wearing that wide-brimmed hat, smiling like she knew something no one else did. Maybe she did. Maybe she always saw the ending long before I was ready for it. Because the truth is, she didn't just leave me money. She left me freedom. There's a quiet, strange kind of peace that comes after the storm ends. Not because the damage isn't there, but because you've stopped trying to pretend it didn't happen. That's how the weeks felt after the will challenge was dropped. For the first time in my life, I wasn't constantly trying to read between my parents' tones, or watching my words to avoid another invisible line I never understood. I didn't owe anyone explanations anymore. The house was mine. The trust was mine. The silence was mine. And it was finally enough. Still, peace doesn't mean closure. Not when your entire childhood has been built on questions no one ever answered. One of those questions sat with me every night. Why? Why did they treat me like I was disposable? Why did they ignore everything I achieved? Why did they make me feel like I was a guest in my own family? I couldn't get it out of my head. So I did something reckless. I invited my mother to meet me. Not at the house. Not at their place. I picked a public cafe near the lake, neutral ground. I needed to see her face when there was no couch to sink into, no family photo behind her to remind me where I stood. I didn't want to go back in time. I wanted answers in the present. She showed up 20 minutes late, as expected. Her hair was pinned perfectly, her coat spotless. She looked like someone who had lived her entire life trying to control how she appeared. "Emily," she said, sitting across from me like we were two polite strangers. "Mom," I said simply. The silence stretched between us as I sipped my coffee, and she pretended not to look uncomfortable. She waited for me to speak first. That was our usual rhythm. I always came to her. Always tried to fix what I didn't break. Not this time. You said I'd get nothing. I said, straight to the point. She flinched. Excuse me? You and Dad. You told me not to expect anything. And now I understand why. You thought you had it all. That you'd get Grandma's house. That Dylan would get the rest. And I'd fade away. She gave a tight smile. We just meant that we didn't want you to rely on inheritance. That you should make your own way. No, you meant it literally, I said. You made sure I knew I wasn't part of the plan. She looked away, but I wasn't finished. I found Grandma's journal. Her eyes snapped back to mine. The one with the entries about the $80,000 loan. The one with the receipts. The emails. Everything. I watched the blood drain from her face. For a moment, I saw it. Fear.
Shame.
Something raw. She tried to compose herself. That money was a misunderstanding. Your father. It wasn't a misunderstanding, I said calmly. It was a betrayal. You took from her and never paid her back. Then acted like you were entitled to whatever was left. And when I got it, suddenly I was the villain. She sat back, arms folded tightly. She always favored you. No, I said. She respected me. That's different. She didn't respond. I leaned in, voice quieter now. Why, Mom? Why did you treat me like I was nothing? Why did you choose Dylan over and over again? Her lips parted slightly, and for once, she didn't have a rehearsed answer. After a long moment, she said something I didn't expect. Because you didn't need us. I blinked. She looked down at her hands. Dylan, he always needed saving. He always messed up, always ran to us for help.
But you?
You were quiet, independent. You never asked for anything. It made us feel unimportant. I stared at her, stunned. So you punish me for being self-sufficient. It's not that simple, she said.
No.
It's really not, I said, trying to steady my voice. You raised me to believe I had to earn love. And when I stopped begging for it, you took it away entirely. She was quiet. You hurt me, I said. And I spent years believing it was my fault. She blinked rapidly, but no tears came. I'm not here to change your mind, I added. I just needed you to hear the truth. From me. Not the version you created to make yourselves feel better. She stood slowly. Is this why you called me here? To punish me? I shook my head.
No.
I called you here because I'm done carrying your silence on my back. She looked like she wanted to say something else. Maybe a defense. Maybe an apology. But she didn't. She just walked away. And I let her go. That night, I went back to the house and walked through each room again. It was becoming a habit, a ritual almost. I'd run my fingers along the bookshelves, the windowsills, the piano keys. Every creak and chip felt like part of Grandma's heartbeat. I didn't know what came next. I had money now, yes. A home. But more than that, I had a blank page. For the first time in my life. So I did what I do best. I wrote. I started drafting an essay about generational silence. About emotional inheritance, the kind no one talks about. About what we pass down that isn't in a will. I sent it to a few larger publications, thinking nothing would come of it. A week later, I got an email. A national outlet wanted to publish it. With a feature. Your voice is powerful, the editor wrote. We don't often hear from women like you. Quiet ones who found the courage to speak. They even offered me a paid column to explore similar topics. Healing. Inheritance. Identity. I stared at the screen for a long time before responding. Because for once, I wasn't just surviving someone else's story. I was writing my own. And people were reading. One evening, a few weeks after the piece went live, I got another unexpected message. This one was from someone I hadn't seen in years. My cousin, Jenna. She was Aunt Rachel's daughter, Dad's sister. We hadn't spoken in ages. Last I heard, she moved to Oregon. Her message was short. Emily, I read your article. I cried. I went through something so similar, and I never told anyone. Thank you for speaking up. You made me feel seen. That broke me a little. because I realized I wasn't alone. I never was. There are so many people like me, women who sit quietly in rooms full of noise, waiting to be noticed, who do everything right and still feel invisible, who are told they're lucky to have a roof over their heads when all they want is a place to belong. Grandma gave me more than property and money. She gave me a platform, and maybe, just maybe, I could use it to help others like me. So I kept writing, week after week. I turned the pain into paragraphs, the silence into stories. And the strange thing is, with every word, I felt lighter. I didn't need revenge anymore. I didn't need apologies that would never come. What I needed was freedom, and that came in telling the truth. One morning, I got a knock at the door. Not the sharp, demanding kind like before. It was soft, hesitant. When I opened it, I froze. It was Dylan. He looked smaller. Not physically, but tired. The way someone looks when their world isn't what they thought it was. "I'm not here to fight," he said quickly. I needed to talk." I didn't answer, but I stepped aside. He walked into the living room and looked around like it was the first time he'd really seen it. "This place always felt like a second home," he said.
Yeah.
"For me, it was the only home," I replied. He flinched but nodded. "I read your piece," he said after a beat. "Didn't expect it to hit so hard." I said nothing. He shoved his hands into his pockets. "I was a jerk. My whole life, honestly. I treated you like a shadow. I thought it made me bigger. But now," he shook his head, "I don't expect forgiveness. I just didn't want to pretend anymore." I looked at him, really looked. He wasn't just my brother anymore. He was a man trying to unlearn. Maybe we all were. "I appreciate you coming," I said finally. We stood there, not quite reconciled, not quite broken either. And maybe that's okay. Because healing isn't one clean conversation. It's showing up anyway. Even when it's messy. Even when it's late. Healing isn't linear. It's not this pretty staircase where every step takes you higher. Sometimes it's a circle, and sometimes it's a spiral. And sometimes, on the quiet days when everything should feel okay, you still find yourself staring at the ceiling, wondering why it still hurts. Even after everything. After the money. The house. The validation. After Dylan showed up and said the words I thought I'd never hear. Still, the ache lingered. I sat in the backyard that morning, knees drawn up in Grandma's old wooden rocking chair, the breeze brushing against my skin like a memory. The garden had started to bloom again, pale pink azaleas pushing through dry soil, just like they did when I was a little girl. Grandma used to say, "It's not spring till the azaleas remember." I didn't realize I was crying until a drop hit the page of my notebook. I wiped my cheek with my sleeve, frustrated with myself. Why now? Why still? That's when it hit me. No amount of money or revenge could rewrite the years I spent feeling invisible. No bank account could refund the birthdays where no one remembered what I liked. No deed could undo the nights I lay awake, wondering what I'd done wrong to make my own parents look right past me. The pain wasn't about the inheritance. It was about being forgotten. The next week passed slowly. I kept writing. I published another essay, this one about emotional ghosts, the things we carry long after people leave our lives or stop seeing us altogether. It went viral. I didn't expect it. I woke up to hundreds of comments, emails, DMs. People from all over the country, some even from outside the US, reached out to say, "This is my story too." One message stood out. It was from a woman named Teresa. She was in her 40s, estranged from her family after speaking up about abuse. She wrote, "I thought I was just bitter, but you made me realize I'm healing. Thank you for that." I read her words at midnight, curled up in bed with tears slipping silently down my face. Grandma used to say, "What they don't give you, you learn to grow." I was finally starting to understand what she meant. But life, of course, doesn't pause for healing. And the past has a way of knocking when you least expect it. It was a rainy Wednesday when I got the call from Dad. I stared at the screen for a full 30 seconds before answering. "Emily," he said. "No, hi." No hesitation. His voice was tighter than usual, measured but unsure. I imagined him pacing. I didn't think you'd pick up. Why'd you call? I asked, neutral. There was a pause. I wanted to tell you something before you heard it from someone else. Your mother's not doing well. I stiffened. What do you mean? She was diagnosed last month. Breast cancer. Stage 2. I didn't say anything. He cleared his throat. She's starting treatment next week. She didn't want you to know. But I thought, well, after everything, I thought you should. I let the silence settle. She's scared, he added quietly.
So was I.
Not just because of the diagnosis, but because I didn't know how to feel. My mother, the same woman who once told me I was too dramatic when I cried at her coldness, was now fighting for her life. And part of me wanted to run to her.
To fix it.
To be the daughter she never allowed me to be. But another part remembered everything. The silence. The dismissals. The years I wasn't enough. I'm sorry she's sick, I said finally. I hope she gets better. There was another long pause. She reads your pieces, you know, he said. She doesn't comment or anything. But she reads them. Everyone. That stunned me. I didn't know that, I whispered. She said the one about emotional ghosts broke her, he said. She said she never realized she was one of them. My heart ached. I'm not asking you to come see her, he added quickly. Just maybe think about it. I ended the call gently. And then I sat in the dark for a long, long time. Could I forgive her? Did I want to? That night, I pulled out the journal Grandma left me and flipped to the final page. There, in her handwriting, was a quote I hadn't noticed before. Forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's choosing not to carry their weight with you anymore. The next morning, I drove to the hospital. I didn't tell her I was coming. When I stepped into the waiting room, I saw her sitting in the corner, pale scarf around her head, eyes closed. She looked smaller.
Softer.
Older. I stood in front of her until she opened her eyes. When she saw me, her face broke. Emily. I heard, I said softly. Tears welled in her eyes. I didn't want you to feel sorry for me.
I don't, I said.
I feel complicated. She nodded. I sat beside her, slowly. The silence between us was fragile. I read everything you wrote, she said after a minute. Even when it hurt. I didn't write it to hurt you. I know, she said, voice cracking. But it hurt because it was true. We sat there, two women linked by blood and bruises you couldn't see. I'm sorry, she whispered. I don't know how to fix it. I looked at her for a long time. You don't, I said. Some things you can't fix. But you can stop pretending they didn't happen. She nodded. And in that moment, for the first time in my life, I believed her. That was all I needed. Not a full reconciliation. Not a miracle apology. Just honesty. And for once, it came without resistance. After that, things didn't magically become perfect. She went through treatment. I checked in now and then. We weren't close, but we weren't strangers anymore, either. Dad kept his distance. Dylan sent me a photo of his baby girl a few weeks after she was born. He named her Margaret. That made me cry harder than I expected. I printed out the email from Teresa, the one that thanked me for making her feel seen. I placed it in a frame and set it beside Grandma's picture on the mantel. Because I realized something. The real inheritance she left me wasn't the house. It wasn't the money. It was my voice. And now I was using it for every woman who'd ever been told to stay quiet, to not expect much, to be grateful for what she got. I was done being grateful for crumbs. I was building the whole table now. There's a kind of quiet that only comes after truth. Not the awkward silence of resentment or the echo of things unsaid, but the peace of knowing you've spoken your part. Of knowing that even if no one else understands your story, you do. And that's enough. 6 months passed. Mom was halfway through her treatment. I still wasn't close with her, but we spoke now on our own terms. Small, cautious conversations. Like strangers trying to rebuild a bridge with trembling hands. I didn't push for more. I didn't expect apologies she couldn't give. Some days, she called just to hear my voice. Some days, she didn't call at all. That was okay. I was no longer waiting for her to love me the way I once begged for. Because the truth is, when you stop chasing people who refuse to see you, you finally have the space to see yourself. And I was finally doing that. One morning, I stood in front of Grandma's house, my house, and realized I'd done something I never thought I would. I'd turned it into a home. The peeling paint was gone. The squeaky stair was fixed. The garden, once tangled with weeds, was now full of blooming azaleas, bluebells, and roses. I'd planted them myself, every thorn-pricked finger a reminder that beauty takes work. The old piano had been tuned, and every night I played a little, nothing fancy, just the melodies Grandma used to hum while folding laundry. I even made a habit of lighting a candle in her memory once a week. A simple one, vanilla-scented. The same she used to keep in the kitchen. The flame felt like a promise, quiet, flickering, but steady. That day, I got another call from Judith. "I thought you'd like to know," she said. "We've finalized the closure of your grandmother's remaining properties. The tenants on the rental lot have all transferred their leases to the new management company. The leftover earnings from the estate are being added to your trust." I paused. "There's more?" "A little over $400,000. Margaret had investments we didn't expect to mature so quickly." I exhaled, stunned again. "She planned everything so carefully," Judith added, softer now. "But she always said it wasn't about the money. It was about giving you something no one else did, power to choose." Tears pricked the corners of my eyes. She was right. I used to think power meant control. Winning. Being louder. Being seen. But now I know real power is quieter. It's walking away from the people who doubted you, and not looking back. It's building something for yourself when no one left you a foundation. It's telling your truth and not shrinking when others flinch. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living. And I was ready to do something more. I took a portion of the trust, just enough, and invested it into something Grandma would have smiled at. A foundation. I called it the quiet flame. It's for girls like me. The overlooked ones. The soft-spoken, the too sensitive, the ones who stay up late writing in journals instead of shouting in rooms that don't hear them. We offer scholarships for young women studying writing, therapy, or social work. We host workshops about emotional resilience, generational trauma, and financial independence. I shared the launch on my growing blog. Within days, it went viral again. Women from all walks of life, college students, single moms, grandmothers, messaged me. Some shared their stories. Some just said, "Thank you for lighting the match." And then one message came that stopped me cold. It was from my mother. Just 4 words. "She'd be proud, Emily." No periods. No signature. Just that. I sat in the garden for a long time after reading it, watching the azaleas shift in the breeze. I didn't cry. Not this time. Because I didn't need her words anymore to know my worth. But I accepted them. For what they were. And that's the difference. I wasn't angry anymore. Not at her. Not at Dad. Not even at Dylan. Because in the end, they gave me the greatest gift. Absence. The space to find out who I really was. I think a lot about Grandma in those quiet moments when the house creaks softly at night or the smell of cinnamon lingers in the air. Sometimes I dream of her standing at the sink, drying a teacup, turning to me with that soft smile of hers. "You're more than they ever saw, Emmy," she whispers. "And now you see it too." The last thing I did, the final thread in this tapestry of healing, was visit her grave. I hadn't gone since the funeral. I couldn't. Back then I was too hollow, too raw. But now, I was full of something I couldn't name. Peace. Gratitude. Power. I brought her favorite flowers. Daisies. I knelt in front of the headstone, traced her name with my fingers, and smiled. "Hi, Grandma." The wind was gentle that day. The sun filtered softly through the trees. "I got your letter," I said quietly. "All of them." A tear rolled down my cheek, but it wasn't from grief. It was from knowing. Knowing she loved me so fiercely that she planned for years just to make sure I'd be okay. Knowing she saw something in me I was only just starting to see in myself. Knowing I didn't have to fight to belong anymore because I already did. I'm building something, I whispered, with your name written all over it. I placed my hand on the cool stone. Thank you for choosing me when no one else did. The breeze picked up gently, brushing against my skin like a quiet reply. I stood slowly, pressing a kiss to my fingertips, then to the daisies. As I turned to leave, I didn't feel an ending. I felt a beginning. Because this wasn't the story of a girl who inherited money. This was the story of a girl who inherited herself. And that was worth more than any surprise.